I still remember the day the invitation arrived. A delicate white envelope with golden edges, smelling faintly of cinnamon and pine. Claire had written my name in perfect cursive, Margaret. It looked warm, loving, festive. But the moment I read the words, "We've arranged something special for you this Christmas," my heart sank. There was something in the phrasing, distant, rehearsed, that didn't sound like family. It felt like a message crafted to hide another truth. I sat by the window, the snow falling softly outside, and my hands trembled as I reread it. For years, I had spent every Christmas morning baking pies with my grandchildren and watching their faces light up as they tore open gifts. This year, however, the tone had changed. My son barely called anymore. Claire had taken over everything, the planning, the home, even my relationship with them. And now, this letter felt like a curtain closing quietly in front of me. When I called to ask about the plans, Claire's voice was dripping with sweetness. "Oh, Margaret, you'll love it," she said. "It's a place where you'll be surrounded by people your age. You won't have to worry about anything. Just rest." My chest tightened. A place. Not our home. She wasn't inviting me. She was moving me, for Christmas, into a home that wasn't mine. I wanted to confront her right then, to tell her I knew exactly what she was doing. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled through the phone, pretending gratitude. Because in that moment, I realized something important. You don't fight darkness with noise. You fight it with patience and light. And if Claire was planning to erase me quietly, I'd wait for the perfect time to write myself back into the story. That night, I opened my late husband's wooden chest. Inside was a folder he had left me years ago, sealed and marked for Christmas if needed. I had never opened it until that night. As I held it in my hands, I whispered to the snow outside, "Looks like this Christmas will be your last surprise, Claire." To everyone else, Claire was the perfect daughter-in-law, elegant, composed, generous in public. She knew exactly what to say to make people adore her. At church, she'd hold my arm and whisper loudly, "Oh, Margaret is such a blessing in our lives." But when the eyes turned away, her grip on my arm tightened just enough to leave a mark. Behind her smile, there was calculation, a silent need to control every room she entered. At first, I told myself it was my imagination. Maybe she was just trying to help. Maybe I was too sensitive. But little by little, she began rearranging things that once belonged to me. My old rocking chair disappeared from the living room, replaced by a modern couch that looked like it had never known warmth. My framed wedding photo vanished, too, replaced by her own family portrait. It wasn't just decoration, it was erasure. When my son, David, noticed, he only laughed. "Mom, Claire's just for decorating," he said. But I could see how her hand rested on his shoulder, a soft reminder that she was in control. She had become the center of his world, and I, the guest who had overstayed her welcome. It hurt, not because I wanted power, but because I could feel my son slipping away from me inch by inch, like snow melting under a door. Still, I played along. I complimented her dinners. I thanked her for the smallest favors. I knew that people like Claire thrive on control, and nothing confuses them more than quiet compliance. While she believed she was orchestrating my removal, I was watching, waiting. Every manipulator forgets one simple truth. The quiet ones often hold the sharpest memory. On Christmas Eve week, she arrived with brochures. "They have piano nights, cooking classes, and even a garden," she said cheerfully, handing me glossy pictures of the nursing home. Her voice sparkled with false excitement. I smiled, looked straight into her eyes, and said, "It looks wonderful, dear. You must visit often once I'm there." Her expression faltered for the briefest second. That's when I knew she wasn't expecting me to accept so easily. And that, I thought, would be her first mistake. It didn't take long for me to understand that Claire's sweetness had a price tag. One evening, I overheard her talking on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low but sharp. "Once she moves out, we can finally start renovations," she said. "The realtor said the property's value has doubled since last year." I froze behind the hallway door. The property. My home. The same house David grew up in. The one my husband built with his bare hands. Suddenly, everything made sense. The brochures, the retirement gift, the rush to move me before Christmas. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every smile she had given me, every carefully chosen word that now sounded like manipulation. I realized she wasn't just trying to put me in a nursing home. She was trying to erase my presence completely. To her, I wasn't family. I was an obstacle sitting between her and a very profitable future. In the morning, I found Claire in the kitchen, humming Christmas tunes while decorating cookies with my granddaughter. "Good morning, Margaret," she said, without looking up. "I hope you packed a few things. The home said they'd have your room ready by Friday." My chest burned, but I forced a smile. "Oh, I'm sure they did, dear. You've been so efficient." The word lingered between us like frost. When she left the room, I sat beside my granddaughter, Lily. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "do you like Grandma's house?" Her eyes widened. "I love it. Daddy says it's the only place that smells like Christmas." I nodded, hiding my tears. That's when I made my decision. If Claire wanted my home, she'd have to learn what it truly meant to belong to it. Later that day, I opened the sealed envelope my husband had left. Inside, I found a notarized document, an updated will, dated 5 years before his death. My name wasn't the only one on it. Beneath mine, in his careful handwriting, was another name, Lily. I stared at it for a long moment, and then I smiled. "Looks like this house already knows who it belongs to," I whispered. The next morning, I climbed up to the attic, a place Claire rarely visited because of the dust and cobwebs. The air smelled like cedar and old Christmas ornaments. I opened the window slightly, letting in a sliver of cold winter light, and began sorting through my husband's boxes. He used to keep everything neatly labeled: taxes 1992, David's drawings, house deeds. As my fingers brushed through the papers, I felt as if he were guiding me toward something. And then I found it, a second folder, tucked inside a worn Bible, labeled simply Legacy. Inside were letters, receipts, and an original copy of the property title. My husband had written a note in the corner. "In case anyone ever tries to take this house from you, remember who built it." I pressed the note to my heart. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. I could almost hear his voice whispering through the rafters, reminding me that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits in silence until the right moment to rise. Downstairs, I could hear Claire talking to David. "The realtor said if we list before New Year's, we can close the deal fast," she said. "Mom will be comfortable at the nursing home, and we can finally start fresh." Her words sliced through the floorboards like cold steel. My son's silence hurt more than her voice. He didn't object, didn't question. He just agreed. Maybe not out of malice, but out of weakness. And weakness can be more dangerous than cruelty. I stayed in the attic all afternoon, listening to the wind and thinking about the past. I remembered every Christmas my husband and I had spent decorating that house together. Every nail, every light, every laugh from David as a child. Claire thought she was just selling a property, but what she didn't understand was that this home was a living memory, and memories don't sell that easily. When I finally came down, the house felt colder. Claire had already started removing my things from the hallway. My framed family photos were stacked near the door, ready to be donated. I smiled at her and said gently, "Be careful with those. Some memories bite when handled carelessly." She laughed, but her eyes flickered. She didn't know it yet, but the game had already changed. By mid-December, the house no longer smelled like gingerbread or pine. Claire had replaced the wreath on the door with a modern silver one, cold, perfect, lifeless. One afternoon, I overheard her talking to the caterer on the phone. "Make sure the guest list is adjusted," she said, her tone crisp. "Yes, just the immediate family. Margaret won't be attending this year." My name rolled off her tongue like an inconvenience, not a person. That's when I realized she wasn't just sending me away for Christmas. She was erasing me from it. I walked into the kitchen, pretending I hadn't heard. Claire was arranging Christmas cards on the counter, each with smiling faces of friends who probably thought she was the perfect hostess. "You didn't get my card, did you?" she asked, with that tight little smile. I smiled back. "Oh, I'm sure it got lost in the mail, dear. Things have a way of finding their way back." My words hung in the air, soft, but sharp. She blinked, unsure whether it was kindness or warning. That uncertainty was exactly what I wanted. Later, I went to my room and opened my old Christmas box. Inside were ornaments my husband had carved by hand, one for every year we'd been together. The last one had our initials etched into a wooden heart. I traced the letters with my fingers and whispered, "Don't worry, love. I'll be home for Christmas." The room felt heavy with memories, but beneath the sadness, something fierce was awakening, a quiet resolve. The next day, Claire brought me a pamphlet from the nursing home. "They're expecting you on Christmas Eve," she said cheerfully. "You'll have your own little party there." I looked at the pictures of smiling seniors in matching sweaters and nodded. "It looks lovely," I said softly. "And you'll be free to enjoy your Christmas without worrying about me." Her smile widened, thinking she had won. But inside, I was already setting the stage for her downfall. That night, I called my lawyer. He was an old friend of my husband's, someone who had always treated me with respect. "I think it's time to activate Henry's Christmas clause," I told him. He paused. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "It's what he would have wanted. And it's time Claire learns what family really means." The morning after my call, a thin layer of snow covered the garden like untouched velvet. I watched it from my window as my lawyer, Mr. Thompson, arrived discreetly through the back gate. Claire was out shopping for last-minute decorations, leaving the house temporarily free from her watchful eyes. I met him in the kitchen, the one place she never stayed long enough to sense a conspiracy. "Henry was clever," he said, adjusting his glasses. "He knew there might come a time when you'd need protection from within the family." He placed a sealed envelope on the table, stamped with an old wax insignia of a Christmas bell. "This," he said, "is the Christmas clause. It states that the ownership of the property can only be reaffirmed or transferred if the entire family is present on Christmas Eve, under one roof, before midnight." I felt my chest tighten. "Meaning?" He smiled faintly. "Meaning, if anyone tries to remove you before that night, the clause activates automatically and their claim becomes void." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My husband had anticipated everything, even Claire's ambition. "He always believed Christmas revealed people's true hearts," I whispered. Mr. Thompson nodded. "He wanted this house to stay in the hands of those who understood love, not greed." He paused, looking at me over his glasses. "I assume you have a plan for making sure they're all here?" I smiled slowly. "Oh, I do. And it starts with letting Claire think she's already won." After he left, I sat at the table and traced the wax seal with my finger. There was a strange calm in me. Not revenge, not even anger, but clarity. For years, I had been quiet, accommodating, invisible. But silence can be a weapon, too, sharp, patient, and precise. I would let her build her perfect Christmas, down to the final ribbon, before watching it all collapse like a snow globe dropped from her own hands. That evening, Claire returned, humming carols as she carried shopping bags through the door. "Oh, Margaret," she said, "I found the softest blankets for your new room at the home." I smiled sweetly. "That's lovely, dear. You've thought of everything." She didn't notice the second envelope I had slipped under the family tree, one addressed to David, marked, "Open on Christmas Eve, together." She wouldn't discover it until it was far too late. For the next few days, I pretended to be exactly what Claire wanted, harmless, docile, and grateful. I praised her cooking, admired her decorations, and even offered to help wrap the gifts. "Oh no, don't worry about it," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You'll have plenty of time to rest soon." Her tone was light, but beneath it, I could sense her impatience. She wanted me gone before Christmas morning, before anyone could question her plans. Every night, I'd sit by the fireplace with my tea, watching the flickering lights reflect off the wrapped presents beneath the tree. Among them sat the small golden envelope I had addressed to my son. It looked so innocent, blending in with the other gifts, but its contents carried the weight of truth. Sometimes, I'd catch Claire's eyes lingering on it, her instincts whispering that it didn't belong there. Manipulators always feel when the ground beneath them starts to shift. They just never know when it will collapse. On December 23rd, she grew restless. "David," she said at dinner, "maybe we should move Mom tomorrow instead of Christmas Eve. The weather might get worse." I looked up from my plate and smiled faintly. "Oh, I'm sure we can wait one more day, dear. After all, Christmas Eve is a family night, isn't it?" David hesitated. Claire forced a smile. "Of course it is." Her fork clinked against the plate, a small sound, but it betrayed her nerves. Later that night, I found her in the living room, rearranging the gifts. "Everything looks beautiful," I said softly, stepping closer. "But be careful with that golden one, it's special." She froze for a second, her hand hovering above the envelope. "What's in it?" she asked, trying to sound casual. I shrugged. "Oh, just a little something for David. He'll open it on Christmas Eve." Then I smiled. Some surprises are worth waiting for. Her face tightened, just enough for me to see the fear behind the control. When she went upstairs, I stayed behind, staring at the glowing tree. The house was quiet except for the crackle of the fire and the ticking of the old clock. I could feel the energy shifting, like the calm before a winter storm. I whispered to the empty room, "Tomorrow night, this house will remember who it belongs to." And deep down, I knew Henry would be watching. The house looked like something out of a magazine, candles glowing in every window, the scent of cinnamon and roast turkey drifting through the air, carols humming softly in the background. To anyone walking by, it was the image of a perfect Christmas. But beneath the sparkle, something darker pulsed. Every smile Claire gave was too tight, every laugh just a little too sharp. She was unraveling, though she didn't know it yet. That morning, she came into my room holding my packed suitcase. "The driver will be here by 6, she said with that bright tone people use when they're hiding cruelty. "You'll be settled just in time for the Christmas Eve party at the home." I folded my hands calmly on my lap. "How thoughtful, dear," I said. "I'll be ready." She seemed almost disappointed that I wasn't fighting back. Manipulators expect resistance. They don't know what to do with acceptance. As the clock ticked toward evening, guests began to arrive. Friends, neighbors, even David's co-workers. Claire wanted an audience for her perfect Christmas, but fate had other plans. Just before dinner, the doorbell rang again. I saw her frown, confused, and when she opened the door, her face drained of color. Standing there, hat in hand, was Mr. Thompson. "Merry Christmas," he said warmly. "I was invited." Her smile froze. "Invited? By whom?" "By Henry," he replied calmly. "He left instructions for this night." David looked from Claire to me, puzzled. "Mom, what's going on?" I stood slowly, smoothing my dress. "Oh, just a small family tradition your father wanted us to keep," I said. "We'll all open one special envelope together after dinner." The room fell quiet for a moment. Claire forced a laugh, waving it off. "How charming," she said. But her eyes never left that golden envelope under the tree. Dinner was tense. Every clink of a fork sounded like a countdown. Claire tried to keep the conversation light, but her hands shook slightly when she poured the wine. Mr. Thompson watched her quietly, taking notes in that old leather book of his. And as the clock neared midnight, I could feel Henry's presence in the air, steady, patient, waiting for truth to take its seat at the table. The clock struck 11:57 when I finally stood up. The guests had gone quiet, as if they could feel something sacred about to unfold. The fireplace crackled softly, and the golden envelope under the tree shimmered in the warm glow. "It's time," I said, my voice steady but calm. David looked confused, half smiling. "Mom, what's this about?" I smiled gently. "It's your father's last Christmas gift to all of us." I picked up the envelope and placed it on the table. Claire's eyes followed every movement, her fingers tapping nervously against her wine glass. "Maybe we should do this tomorrow," she said quickly. "Everyone's tired." Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "I'm afraid this can only happen tonight before midnight." His tone left no room for discussion. I slid the envelope toward David. Go on, sweetheart. Your father wanted you to read it. David opened it carefully. Inside was a single folded letter and a notarized document. As he read the first lines aloud, his voice began to tremble. If you are reading this on Christmas Eve, it means my family is gathered under our roof, as it should be. This home was built from love, and it will remain a sanctuary for those who still know what love means. David stopped, glancing at me. I nodded for him to continue. The property, effective immediately, will transfer to my wife, Margaret, and our granddaughter, Lily. No sale, lease, or relocation shall take place without their joint consent. The room froze. The only sound was the faint crackle of the fire. Claire's face went pale, then red. This can't be legal, she stammered. Mr. Thompson calmly adjusted his glasses. It's perfectly legal, Mrs. Carter. Your late father-in-law was meticulous. She turned to David, her voice breaking. You knew about this? He shook his head, speechless. No, I swear I didn't. I took a slow sip of tea and finally looked at her. You wanted me gone, dear, I said softly. But Henry made sure that as long as this house stands, no one can remove me from it. Not even you. Her hands trembled. You planned this, she whispered. I smiled. No, Claire. He did. I simply waited for the right Christmas to let you open your gift. As the clock struck midnight, the letter's last line gleamed in the candlelight. Merry Christmas, my love. And remember, true homes are guarded by hearts, not walls. And at that moment, for the first time in years, the house felt alive again. For a long moment, no one moved. The flames in the fireplace seemed to whisper as the truth settled into the room like snow on stone. Claire stood frozen, her face drained of color, the perfect hostess mask finally cracking. This is absurd, she muttered, snatching the papers from David's hand. You can't just, Mr. Thompson interrupted gently. Actually, she can. Henry's clause was airtight. Any attempt to relocate Mrs. Carter before tonight has already nullified your claim to the property. His voice was calm, precise, final. David rubbed his temples, trying to process it all. Claire, is this true? Were you planning to move Mom into a home? His tone was quiet, but it cut deeper than anger. Claire's lips trembled. David, I just wanted what's best for her. She needs care, and this house, it's too much for an old woman. I looked at her steadily. Old, perhaps, but not foolish. The words landed softly, yet they echoed louder than any shout could. The silence that followed was thick with shame. David lowered his eyes, realizing how blind he'd been. Mom, I'm sorry, he whispered. I reached across the table and touched his hand. Love doesn't need apologies, son. Just truth. Then I turned to Claire. And truth has a way of showing up uninvited, especially at Christmas. She looked down, defeated, her perfect red nails trembling against the letter her greed had summoned. Guests began to excuse themselves quietly, murmuring awkward goodbyes. The perfect Christmas image she had built was now nothing more than broken ornaments scattered across the floor. Mr. Thompson handed me a final paper to sign, sealing the clause into effect. It's done, he said softly. The house is yours and Lily's. I thanked him, feeling the weight of both justice and peace settle over my heart. When everyone had left, I stood by the tree, the golden envelope now resting empty on the table. The lights twinkled gently, reflecting in the tears I hadn't realized were falling. I wasn't celebrating revenge. I was celebrating freedom. I whispered into the quiet room, Merry Christmas, Henry. We did it. And somewhere, in the crackle of the fire, I swore I heard him whisper back, You never left home. The morning after Christmas Eve felt unusually still. The snow outside had thickened overnight, blanketing the garden in white silence. The chaos of the night before seemed almost like a dream, yet the golden envelope still lay on the mantel, its seal broken, its truth set free. I brewed a pot of coffee, the same way Henry used to, and let the scent fill the kitchen. The house felt peaceful again, not because it was empty, but because it was finally honest. I found David sitting by the window, his hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. His eyes were distant, heavy with guilt. "I didn't see it, Mom," he said quietly. "I didn't want to believe she could do that." I sat beside him and placed my hand over his. "Love blinds us, son. It always has. But what matters is that we open our eyes before it's too late." He nodded slowly, his expression softening like a child's. "I almost lost you," he whispered. "No," I said gently. "You almost forgot me. But forgetting isn't the same as losing. I was always here." Upstairs, I could hear Claire moving around, packing her things. No words, no apology, just the sound of drawers closing, zippers sliding, the quiet farewell of pride defeated. When she came down, she paused at the door, her eyes glossy but dry. "I suppose I should go," she murmured. I simply nodded. "Merry Christmas, Claire." For the first time since I'd known her, she didn't have a rehearsed smile. She just left, and with her departure, the air itself seemed to breathe again. Later that morning, Lily came running into the living room, holding one of her handmade ornaments. "Grandma, can we bake cookies again?" she asked, her face glowing with innocence. I laughed softly. "Of course, my dear. But this time, we'll make enough for everyone, even the ghosts of Christmas past." She giggled, not understanding, and I felt something I hadn't in years. Pure, unshakable joy. As the fire crackled and snow fell outside, I realized that peace doesn't always come with quiet. Sometimes it comes with truth. I looked around the room, touched the wooden walls Henry built, and smiled. Home, I whispered to myself, was never the place they could take from me. It was the strength they could never see. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed and the house had grown quiet again, I climbed back up to the attic. Something inside me kept whispering that Henry wasn't finished speaking. The air was cold, but not unfriendly. It smelled of cedar and thyme. I opened the old trunk one more time, the same one where I'd found the Christmas clause weeks ago. Beneath layers of papers and photographs, tucked inside a small wooden box, I found an envelope yellowed by age. The handwriting stopped my breath. "Henry." My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter wasn't long, but every word carried the warmth of his voice. "My dear Margaret, if you ever find this, it means life has tested your strength once more. You've always had a quiet fire inside you. Never let the world convince you that kindness is weakness. Protect our home, but more importantly, protect the love within it. The walls may crumble one day, but the spirit of this house will live in you and in Lily. That's the only inheritance that truly matters." I sat there for a long time, the paper pressed to my heart, tears slipping down my face like snow melting on glass. Henry had known. He had seen something coming long before I did. Not just Claire's ambition, but the loneliness that comes when the old are treated as burdens instead of roots. His words didn't sting, they healed. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had won anything. I simply felt at peace. As I descended the attic stairs, the house seemed to breathe with me. Every step echoed with memory, our laughter, our arguments, the lullabies I once sang to David when he was small. Downstairs, the Christmas lights still glowed softly against the window pane. I placed Henry's letter on the mantel beside the golden envelope. Together, they looked like the past and the present finally shaking hands. I whispered into the empty room. "You were right, my love. Homes don't need walls, they need hearts." And as the fire flickered, I could almost swear I saw his shadow in the reflection of the glass, smiling the same way he did on our first Christmas together. In the weeks that followed, the snow melted slowly, leaving behind glistening puddles that mirrored the winter sun. The silence that once felt heavy now felt sacred, a silence filled with peace instead of fear. Each morning, I'd open the curtains wide and let the light pour in. It was as if the house itself was waking up after a long sleep. I began to fill the rooms again, not with furniture or decoration, but with life. It started with one simple act. I invited Mrs. Jenkins from down the street to join me for tea. Her children rarely visited, and I knew that kind of quiet. Then came Irene, a widow from church, and soon after, 2 more women who'd been living alone for years. We sat around the kitchen table, talking, laughing, baking, filling the house with warmth. "This place feels alive," Irene said one afternoon. I smiled. It always was. It just needed to be reminded. Word began to spread. People in town started calling my home the House of Light. They said it was a place where no one was forgotten, where the old found company and purpose again. I didn't plan it. It just happened naturally, like sunlight spilling through an open window. Lily loved it too. She'd help me decorate the rooms and serve cookies, her laughter echoing through the halls her mother once tried to sell. Sometimes, I'd catch myself talking to Henry as if he were still beside me. "You see, my love?" I'd whisper to the empty chair. The home you built didn't end with us. It began again. And every time I said it, I'd feel that same gentle warmth in my chest, as though he were nodding in quiet approval. One evening, as the sun set over the snowy hills, David came by with flowers. "Mom," he said softly, looking around at the women chatting in the living room, "you turned this house into something beautiful." I smiled, placing a hand on his cheek.
"No, dear.
I just let it remember what it was built for, love." And in that moment, the whole house seemed to glow, alive once more with the light of forgiveness. It was early spring when I saw her again. The snow had melted, the garden was blooming, and the house was filled with the scent of lilacs. I was sitting on the porch, knitting while the afternoon sun kissed the wooden steps, when a familiar car stopped at the gate. For a moment, I thought it was just a memory, but then the door opened, and Claire stepped out. She looked smaller somehow, thinner, her posture no longer sharp with pride. In her hands, she held a small bouquet of white lilies, the same flowers from Henry's funeral. She hesitated before approaching. "May I come in?" she asked softly. Her voice no longer carried authority, only exhaustion. I nodded, motioning toward the porch. "Of course, dear. This house still remembers your footsteps." She sat across from me, eyes lowered. The silence between us stretched like a fragile bridge. One step in the wrong direction, and it would crumble. Finally, she whispered, "I was wrong, Margaret. About everything." Her voice cracked. I wanted control. I thought if I could own the house, I'd finally belong. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the villain of last Christmas, but a woman lost in her own fears. "You never needed to own it, Claire," I said gently. "You just needed to love it. And the people inside it." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I hurt David. I hurt you. And I don't expect forgiveness." I set my knitting aside and leaned forward. "Then don't expect it. Earn it. Life always gives us another season to plant what we destroyed." We sat there in silence, watching the wind dance through the flowers. Lily ran into the yard, chasing butterflies, her laughter echoing through the air. Claire smiled faintly. "She's grown so much," she whispered. "She has your strength." I shook my head.
"No, dear.
"She has what we both needed, courage to begin again." Claire wiped her eyes and nodded. "Maybe one day, if you'll let me, I'd like to visit again." I smiled softly. Doors are meant to open, not to close. Just don't forget what's behind them. As the sun set behind the hills, Claire stood up to leave. She placed the lilies beside the porch railing. "For him," she said quietly. I nodded. He'd like that. When she drove away, I felt no anger, no triumph, only peace. The house seemed to sigh in agreement, its windows glowing with golden light. And for the first time, I realized forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. It's about freeing yourself from the need to keep them out. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of life settled into quiet harmony. The house had regained its warmth, not from the fire alone, but from the voices and laughter that now filled its rooms. One snowy afternoon, I sat by the same window where the story had begun, watching Lily build a snowman in the yard. She hummed Christmas songs, her little boots leaving patterns in the snow, and I realized how much had changed. The pain had softened, the anger had vanished, and in their place, something deeper had taken root. Peace. I took out a piece of parchment and began to write. "My dearest Lily," I began, One day this house will be yours. But it will never truly belong to you. It will belong to every heart you welcome inside. Never measure love by what you can hold, but by what you're willing to give. Your grandfather built these walls with his hands, but he built its soul with kindness. And if you ever feel lost, remember, the light that guides you home is the one you carry within. The ink flowed easily, as though the house itself was helping me write. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the same golden envelope that had once changed our fate. Then I tucked it behind the family photo on the mantel, where time could find it when it was ready. Someday, Lily would read it and understand that true inheritance isn't made of bricks or money, but of love preserved through storms. That evening, David came home early, carrying a small tree he'd found in town. "Thought we could decorate together," he said shyly. We set it by the window, hung old ornaments, and laughed at how crooked the star looked on top. "It's perfect," I told him. And it was imperfect, human, real. The kind of Christmas I had almost lost but somehow regained. As the night deepened, I looked around and whispered to myself, every home has its ghosts, but only the living can turn them into light. The wind outside howled softly, but the fire inside glowed steady, a promise that the legacy of love, once nearly buried, would keep burning for generations to come. It had been many years since that winter that changed everything. Time, as always, had moved gently but relentlessly, leaving behind both wrinkles and wisdom. The House of Light still stood proudly on the hill, its white walls kissed by ivy and memory. Every December, it seemed to glow brighter than the rest of the neighborhood, as if it remembered that its story began with a Christmas miracle. That year, the snow fell early, soft and heavy, wrapping the garden like a blanket of peace. I was sitting by the fireplace, my hands wrapped around a cup of chamomile tea, when I heard the familiar sound of laughter outside. Through the frosted window, I saw Lily, now a grown woman, walking up the path with a little girl bundled in red wool. My heart fluttered the same way it did when she was a child. When she opened the door, the cold rushed in, followed by the warmth of generations. "Grandma," she said, smiling, "I want you to meet Emily." The little girl peeked from behind her mother's coat, eyes wide as stars. "Is this the magic house Mommy told me about?" I laughed softly, kneeling down. "Magic? Oh, sweetheart, the only magic here is love, and that's the strongest kind." Emily giggled and ran to the tree, where the old golden envelope still hung like an ornament. "Can I open it?" she asked. Lily shook her head gently. "Not yet, darling. That's Grandma's story." I looked at my granddaughter and smiled. "And one day, it'll be yours too." We spent the evening decorating, baking, and sharing stories. Lily told Emily about her great-grandfather Henry and how he built the house. Then she spoke of the Christmas when everything almost fell apart, and how forgiveness saved us. I watched her, proud and grateful. She spoke not as a child who once witnessed pain, but as a woman who understood healing. It was then I realized, the true legacy wasn't the house, it was the strength to love, even after the storm. When Emily finally fell asleep by the fire, I looked at Lily and whispered, "You've kept the light alive." She took my hand and smiled through tears. "No, Grandma, you did." Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the past in silence, while inside, the laughter of a new generation filled the air. And for the first time, I understood what eternity feels like, a love so bright, it never really ends. The following winter came quietly, without fanfare, just soft snow and a calm that felt like a whisper from heaven. My body had grown frail, but my spirit had never been stronger. Every morning I'd wake to the scent of cinnamon and the distant laughter of Lily and Emily in the kitchen, and I knew that life, in its infinite mercy, had given me more time than I ever deserved. Time to see the seeds I planted blossom into something lasting, love that no storm could wash away. I spent my days in the old armchair by the window, the same one Claire once tried to replace. The sun would warm my face through the glass, and I'd watch the garden Henry built, still alive, still beautiful, still ours. Emily often sat at my feet, drawing pictures of angels and houses with glowing windows. Grandma, she'd ask, "Is Grandpa Henry really watching us?" I'd smile. "Always, my dear. He never missed a Christmas." And deep down, I believed it with every beat of my heart. One evening, I took out my journal, the one I'd kept hidden all these years, and began to write. "If you are reading this," I wrote, "know that my story isn't about victory or revenge, but about remembering who we are when the world forgets us. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself to love again. Take care of this house, but take better care of each other. Homes don't survive through walls. They survive through hearts." When I finished, I placed the journal inside the golden envelope and tucked it back onto the mantel. It had once carried justice, then wisdom, and now it carried peace. I looked at the fire one last time and whispered, "Thank you, Henry, for teaching me how to stay." The flames flickered softly, almost like they were answering back. That night, as the snow fell quietly outside, I drifted asleep in my chair, wrapped in a blanket Lily had knitted. I dreamt of a house filled with light, laughter, and Christmas songs, and of a man waiting by the doorway, smiling the way he did the first day we met. He reached out his hand, and I took it. When morning came, the fire was still burning, but the chair was empty, and the house was full of light. The next morning, the world outside was covered in silver snow. The light coming through the window was soft, almost holy. Lily called for her grandmother, but the silence that answered her was deeper than sleep, peaceful, still, and eternal. When she found Margaret sitting by the fireplace, a faint smile rested on her lips, her hands gently folded over the blanket. The fire still burned beside her, as if keeping watch. For a long moment, Lily stood frozen, tears falling before words could form. "Goodbye, Grandma," she whispered, her voice breaking like dawn. Emily, too young to understand the weight of loss, tugged at her mother's hand. "Is Grandma sleeping?" Lily knelt down, brushing a tear from her daughter's cheek. "Yes, my love," she said softly. "She's home now, truly home." As she spoke, her eyes fell upon the golden envelope on the mantel, now slightly open, the corner of a letter peeking through. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. The handwriting on the front stopped her breath. "For Lily and Emily, my girls." She unfolded it carefully, the paper fragile, the ink a little faded. The letter began simply, "If you're reading this, I've finally gone to see your grandfather again. But don't be sad. I had the life I wanted, not perfect, but full of meaning. This house has seen both pain and miracles, and now it belongs to you. Keep its doors open. Let laughter fill its halls. Let kindness guard its walls. And remember, my loves, the world can take everything from you but your light." Lily pressed the letter to her heart, her tears falling onto the page like small blessings. "She knew," she whispered. "She always knew." Emily climbed into her lap, resting her head on her chest. "Can we keep her Christmas tree forever?" she asked. Lily smiled through her tears. "Yes, sweetheart. Every Christmas will be hers." They sat by the fire together, mother and daughter, holding the letter between them like a sacred flame. The golden envelope, once a weapon of justice, had become a vessel of love, carrying the story of one woman's courage across generations. And as the wind outside danced through the snowy garden, the house seemed to hum softly, almost as if it were breathing again. For within its walls, Margaret's spirit lived on, not as a ghost, but as light. Years passed, and time wove its quiet thread through everything it touched. The little girl who once built snowmen in the garden had become a woman, graceful and strong, her hair touched with the same silver that once crowned Margaret. The House of Light still stood proudly, its white paint a little faded, its windows framed with ivy and memory. Every December, Emily returned, no matter where life had taken her, to honor the story that began long before she was born. One winter evening, as the snow fell softly against the windows, Emily lit the fireplace the way her grandmother once did. The scent of pine and cinnamon filled the room, and the same golden envelope, now carefully preserved in glass, gleamed on the mantel. She sat by the fire with her own daughter, Rose, a curious child with bright eyes and endless questions. "Mama," Rose asked, "is it true Grandma Margaret saved this house with a Christmas letter?" Emily smiled. "Yes, my love, with courage, kindness, and a truth that couldn't be bought." After Rose went to bed, Emily sat alone at the desk where Margaret once wrote her final words. The flickering candlelight danced across the old family photographs. She took out a blank page and began to write. "To whoever finds this, know that this house isn't just wood and stone. It's a heartbeat, one that began long before me and will continue long after. My grandmother taught me that forgiveness can build stronger foundations than revenge, and that light only grows when it's shared. If you ever feel lost, light a candle here, and you'll find your way." When she finished, she folded the letter and sealed it in a new golden envelope, placing it behind Margaret's portrait. For a moment, she thought she heard the soft hum of a familiar voice, her grandmother's whispering, "Well done, my dear." Emily smiled through her tears. The fire crackled gently, and outside, snow began to fall, just as it had all those years ago. She whispered to the empty room, "The promise is kept." And in that instant, a gust of wind brushed through the chimney, making the flames dance higher, not wildly, but joyfully. The same light that once saved a family continued to burn, steady and eternal. For as long as that fire lived, so did Margaret, not as memory, but as the living spirit of home. The years folded softly into one another, and the House of Light became more than a home. It became a legend. People in town still spoke of the Christmas when a family nearly lost everything, only to find the true meaning of belonging. The ivy on its walls grew thicker, its windows glowed warmer each winter, and every corner seemed to hum with unseen life. Visitors said they could feel something there, not ghosts, but love itself, woven into the very air. On a quiet Christmas night, long after Emily had grown old and Rose had taken her place by the fire, the wind rose gently through the hills. The snow fell like whispers of blessings, covering the path that had carried generations home. Inside, Rose lit a single candle and placed it on the windowsill, the same way Margaret once did. The flame flickered, golden and steady, casting light across the faces in the family portraits. Each one seemed to smile, as if remembering. She opened her grandmother's letter, fragile, yellowed, but still intact. As she read the words aloud, her voice trembled. "Homes are not made of bricks or names. They are built of love that survives time itself. So long as there is one heart willing to forgive, the light will never die." Rose pressed the letter to her heart, tears glistening in her eyes. Outside, the wind carried her whisper into the night. "We kept your promise, Grandma." The candle's flame danced higher, reflected in the window like a star. From the hill, the house looked as it always had, modest, glowing alive. But to those who understood its story, it wasn't just a house. It was a living soul, built from courage, healed by forgiveness, and kept alive by the laughter of those who refused to forget. The world outside could change, fade, rebuild, but inside those walls, the fire would always burn. And somewhere, beyond time, in a place untouched by cold or sorrow, Margaret and Henry stood together again, watching, smiling, hand in hand. The snow fell gently around them like grace returning to the earth. Because in the end, light doesn't die. It simply finds a new heart to live in.